Yes, Daniel was a prophet. Jesus said so, and we can be rest assured that Daniel was a prophet. So this is exciting, you guys, the book of Daniel. Here we are. So where was Daniel? Well, Daniel was in Babylon, right? Babylon had just sieged Jerusalem and taken a bunch of captives from Israel. And Daniel and his 3 friends were among those who were captured, and they were brought into the king's court. Now, this place was very, very impressive. Did you know that the walls were over 85 feet thick? 85 feet thick, the walls of this amazing city. And they were 300 feet tall. That's like the size of a small skyscraper. And there was a circumference around this amazing city that was a circumference of 60 miles. 60 miles. Can you believe that? And here's the thing. Look at this beautiful archway. This is what it looked like, one of the entrances and one of the gates, right? And it was like they had these blue stones that were baked and glazed, and then there was the yellow gold images of lions and dragons too. This was just, the young guys would have been in awe of this place. It was like a metropolis that was so magnificent, even to today's standards. Some of the roads, the city streets, were 65 feet wide, the city streets, with these beautiful red tiled sidewalks on both sides. The river, the Euphrates River, ran right through the middle of the city, and they had these big, huge retaining walls with that same baked blue glazed tile, that blue tile with the gold images on it. This city was just amazing. It was one of the wonders of the world. And who was in charge of it? It was King Nebuchadnezzar. We see that all through the scripture in the book of Daniel. It's amazing. He was the king of Babylon. And his father was named Nabopolassar. Now, Nabu was their false god, one of their gods, right? And he was the god of prophecy and dreams. Now, it's amazing because this false god couldn't do it, but the God that Daniel worshiped, Yahweh, the God of God, right? The Lord of Lords, he can give the true interpretation to this king, not any of his wise men or his magicians, right? Or these people who had divination. They thought, that they had this power that they can reveal it because they were connected with this false god Nabu. But no, it was the God Yahweh, the Israeli God, the Jewish God Yahweh. He was the only one who can reveal these dreams that the king had of future events, and Daniel was his man, and he was promoted. So look at that city gate. Isn't that amazing? This is one of the gates, what it looked like. The city was amazing, with 300-foot high walls, 85-foot thick thickness to them, and 60 miles of a circumference around this huge city. So this is actually one of the walls that were preserved, one of the bricks. So you could see that in a museum. There's a lion there. There's that blue tile. Isn't this amazing? This is an image that somebody made of what it could have looked, one of the areas could have looked like around the palace, possibly there where King Nebuchadnezzar was. Now check this out. This is what, because a lot of people say like Daniel's a forgery, and it doesn't mean that Israel's going to be restored in the future, and this isn't speaking about the end times. But here's what Isaac Newton said, one of the most brilliant people in history, and he loved the book of Daniel, wrote it over and over, even wrote a commentary on the book of Daniel. Isn't that amazing? So Isaac Newton said this. He said, Daniel was in the greatest credit amongst the Jews till the reign of Roman Emperor Hadrian. Remember, Hadrian was around 135 AD, after Jesus' death and resurrection, or his birth, I should say. And Hadrian exiled the Jewish people out of the land of Israel, tried to wipe Israel off the map, and renamed it Palestina. That's where we get the name Palestine today. This evil Roman emperor did that, Hadrian. But we're seeing Israel revived again as a country again. And this guy, Alexander the Great, it's funny. This guy, Isaac Newton, around the 1700s, this brilliant scientist. In fact, NASA uses his formulas to this day to project things out to planets like Mars. Those little roving cameras and things that they use his formulas. This is how much of a genius this guy was. We weren't even out in space yet. So this guy was brilliant, known throughout the scientific world as an amazing genius. And he wrote a book on Daniel. He said in it that Israel would be restored in the end times and that there would be a temple. It's amazing. But he said that Daniel was the greatest, has the greatest credit among the Jews. And to reject his prophecies, this is what Isaac Newton said, is to reject Christian religion. For this religion is founded upon his prophecy concerning the Messiah, the Mashiach, right, in Hebrew. Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah, Jesus the Christ. Christ is just Greek for Messiah. Jesus is the Greek word for Joshua, and Yeshua is the Hebrew for Joshua. So his name, Yeshua, actually means salvation, or Yahweh is my salvation. Isn't that amazing? In his name is the Messiah. So this is awesome stuff. So Isaac Newton believed the book of Daniel was written by Daniel himself. I do too. Many scholars argue this, but here's the timeline. Here's where Daniel's at in the timeline. We know that in the beginning was God. In the end is God. He's outside of time, I believe, but there's creation, Adam and Eve, the flood, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, right? Moses right there. And then as we get further along, we see Elijah. And then right around 500, between 600 and 500 BC, which means before Christ, not before Common Era, it means before Christ, we see Daniel. He was right around the time of like Ezekiel, some of these other guys. A little bit later, you see Zechariah and some of these other guys. So that's where the book of Daniel is. Here's a better close-up of the before Christ time, right? So right around here, 500 BC before Christ. So this is the cave number 4 of the Cave of Kuman, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. This is an image I took. I got to go there in Israel. It was amazing back in January. And I want to go again, and you guys are all invited. I'm looking at January 2027. And it's going to be an amazing trip. I'll do some teachings from some of the sites. I'm trying to connect with One for Israel so that we can have an Israeli guide from One for Israel giving us a guided trip there as well. So you have 2 who will give some teachings and guide this trip. I think it's going to be amazing. Probably it might be, we'll look at it, maybe 10 days, something like that. We'll see. But it's amazing there. In fact, I felt really safe there, by the way. But anyway, right here, the Cave of Kuman. These were the men that they preserved the scriptures, and they were friends with John the Baptist. And what they did was they hid these scrolls right before the Romans came, and they wanted to hide these scrolls and preserve them. So they hid them in this cave that they knew about ahead of time. And the Romans never found them, which is, was all part of God's plan. Because right before Israel became a nation again in 1948, these scrolls were found. And they found the complete whole scroll of Isaiah. But they also found in this cave the scroll of Daniel. Now, why is that important? Because the scholars, the liberal scholars, if you go to seminary school, which is supposed to be a Bible teaching Christian school, right? Well, a lot of these aren't, and they're fake, and they're progressive Christianity. They're very liberal in their teaching. Well, some of these professors say that Daniel, it wasn't written by Daniel. It was written by some other guy. It's kind of like they're saying it's a forgery. They're putting their foot in the door, planting these seeds to make you think that Daniel is a forgery. Why do they do that? Because Daniel predicted these kingdoms. He prophesied these kingdoms like Greece, before Greece was an empire. Before it was, he prophesied that. Rome too, he prophesied Rome before Rome was an empire. Medo-Persia, same thing. And so they say it's a forgery. Well, this has been proven wrong over and over. And right here in the Cave of Qumran, they found Okay, they found the scroll of Daniel, and it predates, in this cave, they found it, and it predates that time of the Maccabean revolt. Predates it. Because that's where they really zero in and say, oh my gosh, it was written after the Maccabean revolt, which is 167 BC, right? Because Daniel talks about this Antiochus Epiphanes guy and the abomination of desolation in the holy place, and how he was there for 7 years, all these things. And it was exactly fitting. The Jewish people believed that Antiochus Epiphanes fulfilled what Daniel wrote about in Daniel chapter 8 and 9. This vile one who would come from the Seleucid Empire, right? That's part of the old Grecian Empire. And it happened exactly like that. Now, there's a near side, and then there's a far side prophetic fulfillment, because Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, and he was in reference, this is all in reference to his return, the end times, the end of the age. What age? The church age. This is what Jesus was talking about. And he's saying that when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in that holy place, what's the holy place? It's only the temple, the Jewish temple. There's no other holy place. That's the Jewish temple. He said, get out of Jerusalem, get to the mountains, flee, get away, run away. And that's what a lot of Christians did in 70 AD when they saw that, because they thought that could have been it. That was another near side fulfillment, or mid fulfillment, but there's a end fulfillment as well. Jesus called him Daniel the prophet. He verified Daniel as the author of that book. Also, he called him a prophet, and he was talking about this being toward the end of time. So there's a final fulfillment with this vile one, the Antichrist. But Antiochus Epiphanes, back in 167 BC, before Christ, he was a picture and a type of the Antichrist. He was, just like Joseph is a picture and a type of Jesus Christ. You can watch my videos on that. It's amazing. But Antiochus Epiphanes was that snapshot, gives you a glimpse of what this guy will be like. People want to know what the Antichrist looks like. Look at Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, that's what he looks like. His bride was named Laodice. The name of that city, Laodicea, it was named after Antiochus Epiphanes IV's bride. Laodice IV. That was her name. So he has a bride, the church of Laodicea, that Jesus isn't even in. He spits them out of his mouth. They're vomited out of his mouth, right? They're not in heaven like the church before it, the church of Philadelphia. There's an open door to heaven, and they're spared from the hour of trial, which comes upon the whole face of the earth. So that's a little backdrop on the book of Daniel and how liberal scholars claim that it was not written by Daniel. It was written after the Maccabean revolt. Well, here in the Cave of Kuman, number 4, they found the Daniel scroll dating back to the 3rd century BC, way before that whole thing with Antiochus Epiphanes and the Maccabean revolt, which, by the way, Jesus, in John chapter 10, you can read this, he went to the temple in the winter feast. What's the winter feast? It's the Festival of Lights. It celebrates Hanukkah. Jesus went to the temple for Hanukkah, and that's the Festival of Lights. Because what happened was, when this Antiochus Epiphanes came, this vile one that the book of Daniel speaks about, chapter 8 and 9, right? When he came in, he was there for 7 years in Jerusalem. He murdered 80,000 Jewish people, women, children, men, and then he sold as slaves another 80,000. This was a horrible, awful time. And he set himself up in that holy place. It says he set up history says this, that he set up a image of Zeus. We know that Zeus is like the seat of Satan. We know that from the book of Revelation, Pergamos, the church of Pergamos, where the seat of Satan is from. This is a place in Turkey. Back then it was Asia Minor. This is a place where they set up a temple to Zeus. And we also know that the Nazis, Hitler, loved that place. And he had it disassembled, that place in Pergamos, and put back up in Berlin. You could see it today. It's in a museum. And check this out. Then Hitler had this place called Nuremberg, right, where he gave all these speeches and rallies and evil things like that they did. And he had it set up to look like Pergamos. And he had his altar or his podium where he gave speeches there in the exact place where Zeus, his image, was. So this Antiochus Epiphanes back in 167 BC before Christ had this thing set up in the holy place. It was an abomination of desolation, and slaughtered a pig, they say, put the blood all over, it was a horrible time. But the Maccabean army by, I think it's Matthias Maccabees and some of these others, Judas Maccabees, they revolted against this guy and they fought. And then they cleansed the temple, and they set up the menorah and had the temple back, right, to give people hope. But here's the thing, there was only one vat of oil left, enough for one day to keep that menorah, that 7 golden lampstand lit, which was giving people hope. But there was only enough for one day. And they poured it in, but miraculously, this is according to Jewish history, for 8 days, that's why Hanukkah is 8 days, it stayed lit and burning bright and hot in that holy place, which gave the people down below who were fighting hope. Isn't that awesome? So that is the winter feast, the festival of lights, where Jesus entered in John chapter 10. So amazing, amazing stuff. So let's take a look at the book of Daniel, and let's check it out real quick. So we could see right here that Daniel and his friends are taken to Babylon. So in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. So the king of Judah was Jehoiakim, and it was awful what he did, what Nebuchadnezzar did to this man, and killed his young son right in front of him, and then plucked his eyes out, made him blind. So that was the last thing he saw. Really evil what Nebuchadnezzar did. He was a very violent man with lots of anger issues, but God, I think, eventually even saves this man. So there's hope for everybody, you guys. Pray for your enemies. So King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vessels of the house of God, right, from the temple, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, right, Nabu, right, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both the royal family and of nobility, right, youths, right, like the movie, youths without blemish, of good appearance, and skillful in wisdom, that's Daniel all the way, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them daily portion of food, so they didn't eat that food. As you guys know, the story of Daniel, they kept eating the food that they were supposed to eat as the Hebrews, which was in the Torah, the law of God, the law of Moses, and they stayed true to his God. He stayed true to his God. And so they didn't conform themselves to Babylon. They stayed who they were, following the Lord. And Daniel is an amazing prophet. He is a prophet because later King Nebuchadnezzar has this dream, and none of his satraps and wise men and magicians, none of them can figure out, right? So his so-called prophets, you could say, could figure out what this dream was, because he demanded they tell him what it was first and then the interpretation. King Nebuchadnezzar was wise enough to know that if you tell the dream, then someone can make something up, right? He said, no, you got to tell me the dream. Well, then he says, and if you can't, I'm going to kill all of you guys, destroy them. And so they were like super scared, right? And Daniel was part of these wise men now, him and his young buddies, his 3 young buddies. So what does he do? He says, tell the king to give us a little more time. He prays. He gets on his knees before Yahweh, before his God. And God gave Daniel the dream and the interpretation. And there's so much to it because it speaks of the kingdoms of the world, starting with Babylon, right? These empires, and then the Medo-Persian Empire. It's this big image of a statue, but God has an angel. It actually interprets what it is to Daniel. And then the belly of bronze, which speaks of the Grecian Empire, right? And then the 2 legs of iron, the Roman Empire, like the Eastern and the Western Roman Empire, which lasted longer than any of those. and it was two legs of iron. And then this last kingdom, the kingdom of the end times, this empire of the end, which is iron, a little bit of the Roman Empire, right, mixed with clay. And then it's weak, and there's a stone which is cut out without human hands. It comes across the universe, and it smashes this image and turns it into powder and establishes the kingdom of God on earth. That speaks of Jesus. Jesus, the stone, which the builders rejected, has become the chief cornerstone, the precious stone, right? That's Jesus. And the image is this, it's this image starting with Babylon, then the Medo-Persian, then the Grecian Empire, the Roman Empire. It's that whole image moving forward in time. That's what we are today, because even us in the United States, we have a Senate, a Congress, a Senate. All these things were established in the Grecian Empire and then used in the Roman Empire. This was the form of government, right? So it's speaking of this world government, this world system that's moving forward in time, in phases of empires, but still one image moving forward. And Jesus eventually puts an end to it and establishes his kingdom on earth. So this is kind of an overview of Daniel right here, this video. And we're going to go into some details and some of these prophecies. Also looking at how he was also a picture and a type of Jesus, because Daniel was put into that lion's den. He was falsely accused, thrown into this pit. And then the stone was rolled in front of it. They left him for dead. Stone rolled in front of it. And then it was rolled away. There was a seal on it and everything, rolled away. And the king asked, "Are you alive, Daniel?" And he says, "I am alive." Just like Jesus was alive, and the stone was rolled away. And then the enemies of God, the enemies that were falsely accusing Daniel, they were thrown into the lion's den. And they were killed, right? But there's a huge picture of Jesus in that part, but there's also so much prophecy. He even fulfills or prophesies about the exact day that Jesus comes. If you do the math, it tells you when Jesus rode in on the donkey down the Mount of Olives on Palm Sunday from Daniel's time. It's amazing. And then Daniel says the Mashiach, or the Shiloh, shall be cut off. Speaking of the Messiah, he will be cut off. And this is during the Roman period. It's in there. But then he speaks about this abomination of desolation, about the end of the age. And Jesus said that when you see that, that's about the end times. And we're going to be looking at all of that, you guys. Hey, by the way, there's a live stream coming up right after this. My friend, so excited about this. Hey, I love you. And don't forget, you can click on this playlist. Check out my book too, See Jesus in the Old Testament. The very last chapter of this is about Daniel. Very comprehensive, 320 pages of where you'll find Jesus in the Old Testament. But hey, don't forget, you can hit this playlist right here, How to Find Jesus in the Old Testament, for free. You can subscribe for free. Don't forget to do that. All of it's free. There's nothing, no strings attached. And I love you. God bless you. And remember this, Jesus wins in the end. Yeshua wins, my friend. I love you.